All right, going live in 3, 2, 1.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Excuse me. This is a call to order the Finance Committee. Today is Wednesday, August 23rd. The time is now 6:31 p.m. In attendance, we have myself, Joseph Skalovic, Committee Chair, Ms. Christine Baptiste Perez, Committee Member, and Ms. Jennifer Perez, Committee Member. And we also have Board Member Robert Traber. I don't see any other board members at this point. I see the Superintendent, Dr. Levy David, Ms. Siegel, and I don't know if Ms. Siegel, you got staff on. I can't see them at this point. So, first item on the agenda will be approval of minutes dated June 14th, 2023. Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve minutes from June 14th.
All in favor? I'm sorry, discussion, any errors or omissions noted to note? Hearing none. All in favor?
Point order. Mr. Sokovic, did you second?
Yes, I did.
Okay, I didn't hear you on my end.
Yeah, something's happening with your screen. It's like bubbling or something. Yeah. So you're having some sort of lag. Any errors or omissions of note, Ms. Baptiste Perez?
No.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions?
I'm gonna abstain.
I'm gonna abstain.
Thank you. Motion carries. Next item up on the agenda is discussion and review of the paperwork for compliance with board policy and procedure 3320.1 and related city purchasing requirements for newly incurred expenses associated with the use of the amphitheater for the convocation. Little background on why I requested this item. Not directed towards anybody, but this is a city with a prolific history of when things did not go through proper procedures and processes. There have been exchanges of brown bags, not on the Board of Education's part, but on the city purchases part, and it's a history I do not want repeated. And as board members, we are financial stewards of city resources, and we must make sure they're expended properly and in compliance with purchasing procedures. Who's taking away this item, please? Who's going to lead us?
I can present this item.
Thank you. Please go ahead.
Thank you. This is Marlene Siegel. I'm the Chief Financial Officer. The agreement with Harbor Yard Amphitheater was entered into in order to hold the convocation on Monday, August 21st. There was limited time available in which to arrange the convocation. Superintendent reached out quickly and expeditiously to Harbor Yard, made the arrangements, and the convocation, as everyone knows, was held and was very successful. The cost is $24,000. Harbor Yard, of course, does not have a city or state contract, and so we complied with purchasing procedures, which means that we filed a form that is called a request for qualified purchase, which is basically a request for an exception to competitive bidding on the basis of the vendor being a sole source. It is our understanding that Harbor Yard is the only facility in the geographical area of Bridgeport that has the capacity to hold over 2,000 people. And so we have submitted the request for qualified purchase to the city purchasing office. We expect it to be approved. It is correct that usually we aim to have the approval in place in advance, but this just was not possible considering that, you know, our new superintendent came to the district on August 1st and had to make arrangements in very limited time. And all of those arrangements were made expeditiously and meticulously to ensure a very smooth and successful convocation. So we shared with the board the QP, the request for qualified purchase document based on sole source. We've shared the agreement with Harbor Yard, and the agreement will be fully signed and invoice will be processed for payment as soon as we receive the approval from the city purchasing office. We expect it to be, excuse me, we expect the approval to be granted on the basis of the timing of the event. There was no other option available to us.
Mrs. Sokolovich, if you're speaking, you cannot be heard. You're muted.
Thank you. Yeah, I gotta get used to the mute button again. Yes, Ms. Siegel, could you kindly bring up the paperwork provided to the board, please?
Yes. Oh, Rita, may I have approval to share, please?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Let the record reflect at the moment that Mr. Albert Benahan has joined the meeting, and I'm going to ask a question first. Total Mortgage Arena holds about 2,000 people less than a Harbor Yard. Why didn't we reach out to Total Mortgage Arena for a second price? Because that holds, I think, at least over 10,000 people.
I don't know, except that I would like to point out that Harbor Yard, I believe, was also used for the high school graduation in June and has been used in the past for high school graduation. It is an accessible site. It has ample parking, and it has been used in the past due to the various features that are available.
Absolutely, but that's not in question. What's in question is it being referred to as a sole source provider, which it is not. Harbor Yard, Total Mortgage Arena has been used in the past for convocations when we still used to make that expenditure.
Well, the explanation.
I'm a bit confused because Harbor Yard, Total Mortgage Arena also holds large events with upwards of 8,000-9,000 people, and they all manage to park and get their events off without a hitch.
Arrangements, to the best of my knowledge, arrangements had to be made very quickly. The amphitheater has been used in the past. They're very accommodating. The facility is accessible. I believe those were the primary factors that drove the decision-making process.
Okay, I just want to be clear that this doesn't really seem to fall under the category of a qualified purchase. And in my opinion, as a single board member, I don't know how the rest of the board feels in the future when we're booking venues and events such as this, that we follow the purchasing procedure and at least if we receive one other bid from the place right next door that could see almost as many people as the event that we used, because otherwise we're going to be leaving ourselves up to liability of leaving another entity in outside of the process, and it's really, I don't want the board to have that exposure.
Mr. Kalvik, as a finance professional, I can say that going forward, certainly, other bids could be obtained, but I want to reemphasize that in the years I've been in Bridgeport, it is the amphitheater that has been used for convocation. During the COVID years, convocation was not held in its current form, the form that it took on Monday. But now that the COVID pandemic has subsided, the use of the full convocation proceeding can be resumed. And so the amphitheater has been used by Bridgeport in the past for high school graduation and for convocation. There's no other site that has been used. Now, there may be other sites that are available, and in the future, certainly we can secure bids from those sites. And
Right,
perhaps,
okay.
but it's important to understand that the amphitheater has been used in the past. The purchasing procedure was followed in the past. It's being followed now. We fully expect the purchasing committee to approve the use of the amphitheater because they have approved the use in the past.
Yeah, okay, I'm gonna hold it right there for questions from committee members. I see your hand, Mr. Traber. Ms. Baptiste Perez, do you have any questions on this?
I have a comment. Ms. Siegel, is there any kind of limitation? Sorry, I have the dog in the background. Because this is a purchase under $25,000, is that of any significance that the board should be paying attention to? That would make it a qualified purchase? Is there anything to the financial limits?
When a purchase exceeds $2,500, competitive bidding is required. If we don't engage in competitive bidding because we're using a sole source, then we have to file the qualified purchase form with the city purchasing committee. When a purchase exceeds $25,000, then a formal request for bid is required.
Okay, so we didn't have to go through a formal request for a bid because it was under $25,000.
Right, and the superintendent is authorized to sign agreements under $25,000 without board approval, and with compliance, of course, with purchasing procedures, and that is why we have fully complied with purchasing procedures.
Yeah, I don't really see why this is an agenda item as a comment for this. The convocation has historically taken place at the yard when it used to be a baseball theater or baseball stadium with Superintendent Rabinowitz. I think it was also held in 2017 under Superintendent Arista Johnson. And it really, the change came amongst COVID, where it was no longer being in person and then shifted to venues that no longer could accommodate for all our staff to attend. So to a certain extent, I find this very fitting that after COVID, and when we are in a situation as a school district with low morale, we've had inconsistent leadership that's shown in this board's demographic, as well as the shift in superintendents over the years, that we needed an event that can bring us all together, rise above what's going on, and build morale. I think that is exactly what happened with convocation, given that it hasn't happened over the last few years. It's been exclusive and not all-inclusive. I looked at the 2018-2019 views on YouTube, and there was only 291 views. So not even all the staff watched it, at least from what was being recorded from the online data. So I think convocation was a great idea. If it's under the $25,000, I don't see why this is being brought up as an issue. I think given the time and the circumstances, and because of the shift, the perpetual shift in all forms of leadership in this district, for better or for worse, something that can be positive and move us forward was highly necessary. And that's where I stand on this.
Thank you, Ms. Baptiste Perez. Ms. Perez.
I agree with the use of convocation as like a morale building for teachers, especially since it hasn't been used or had in public for the past few years. I will, however, say that when I had convocation in 2016, it was at Total Mortgage Arena. So we have used other sites. So I understand, the need for it, but also, there are other sites that we could have, seen which one is a better bid. Yeah, thank you.
And Mr. Traber.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think the amphitheater was open before COVID. So what we're looking at is Total Mortgage Arena was used for graduations and convocations. I remember speaking there as president in the past and being there for graduations in the past. So I'm not I like the amphitheater. It's a nice place. I like being there for graduation. I just think the point that's being made is that procedure needs to be followed and without, to avoid any appearance of irregularity. So while I don't disagree with the idea of having a convocation, I do agree with the idea of not looking like that we're playing, there's any monkey business. And right now, the new superintendent is walking into town and everybody's looking. And so what Mr. Sokolovic is raising, I think, is a legitimate point, because the amphitheater and the operator of the amphitheater is, a figure of some contention in the city in some ways. So I can explain it or elaborate on that further, but there are those of us that don't think he's the godsend that others do. So I think that it just needs to be we need to make sure that we follow procedure carefully and not look like we're, cutting fast deals with the owner of the amphitheater versus Total Mortgage Arena. And with regard to the convenience, Ms. Siegel, it is absolutely the same convenient spot in terms of parking and location. So I think the Total Mortgage Arena can accommodate the same size and screens and everything else. I remember seeing President Obama there. I've seen lots of functions there besides sporting events and other things there. We've had our events there. So I do think that this, and as I look at the form, there is a form that says, there's more than one space available. And why are we picking this space? And in this case, both spaces are right next to each other. So why did we pick one versus the other? And that is what's being asked here, is why one versus the other got picked. And I have some objective questions on this that I wanted to ask Ms. Siegel, if I may. Ms. Siegel, you said the cost was $24,000.
Yes.
When I looked at the document, I thought it said, well, at first we were told 20,000.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I just had to take a sip of my water there. Then I noticed in the agreement, there was a $1,500 surcharge for, I can't recall, $900 for one thing and $600 for another, that got added on. And the agreement seemed to refer to $22,500, not $20,000. So is the $24,000 the addition of $22,500 plus $1,500?
Yes, it's $22,500 plus $1,500 for the emergency services.
It was emergency services and I think janitorial services, if I recall correctly.
It's included in the document. I'll scroll through so we can look at it.
Yeah, I think the emergency service, the EMT was the $900 and the janitorial was $600, and that was the $1,500 add-on.
It's a long document. I'm still scrolling.
Yeah, it was very long and a whole lot of legalese.
So the $1,500 consists of $600 for custodial services and $900 for the first aid EMT service.
My whole mind isn't completely shut. So the question is, what was the 250 on top of the 20,000? The 2,500, I mean.
I don't know. The agreement that was shown to me was 22.5 plus 1,500 in addendum A.
So then I guess the question is directed then, Dr. Levy-David, at you, because what you had sent us was 20,000 and it didn't explain. I read through it carefully looking to see if there was an explanation for what the 2250 was for.
The question is for me, you said?
I guess so, since Ms. Siegel doesn't know.
I guess I
Yes,
have.
go ahead, Dr. Levy, David.
Can you hear me? Am I muted?
No, you're not muted. You're a little far away.
We hear you. Go right ahead.
Yeah. I guess for me, there's a point of confusion because I know graduation was held and I've watched previous board meetings that were held and I did not see this level of questioning, this level of contention over the decision to use the amphitheater for graduation earlier this year. That seemed to be perfectly appropriate and within the bounds of what the board expected. I'm not sure if the difference is that I was the one who made this particular purchase, and I'm hoping that's not the case. I am not a politician. I'm hearing comments that are very personal about the owner of the arena. That is not within the scope of my work. My job was to find a place that I felt was appropriate for what I hope to accomplish for convocation for the entire organization and for the students who participated. And I did go to the amphitheater and I did see the arena and decided that space was way too large for what we were hoping to accomplish. And the Klein Theater, I'm sorry, but it was just not appropriate for what I was hoping to accomplish with our staff. And if you don't particularly like the amphitheater, I apologize, but I wanted a space that was open where people could breathe fresh air and also feel safe considering we have a resurgence of COVID. So those were the pieces that I considered. I wasn't looking at who was politically expedient or popular or trusted by the board. I was looking to see what was appropriate for what I wanted to accomplish, introducing not only myself, but also our beautiful students to the community. Our job, what I was tasked with doing, was helping to rebrand this district, and that includes rebranding the board. And I made it very clear during the community forum that I would not be successful in doing that without board support. This type of meeting does not feel supportive for me.
Okay, so I still asked a specific question, which is the difference between the 20,000 we were told and the 22,500.
The 20,000 was an estimate.
Okay, I didn't get that.
It was a round number that I was given. It was an estimate.
That's okay. It was not conveyed to me that way. So I wondered, since this is now a meeting.
I did the conveying. I was the one who sent the memo to the board describing the 3 different facilities, describing the amount that I was given as an estimate. It was me. It all came from me. So when you're asking about what was conveyed, it all came from me. And it was conveyed to
everyone. Asked you. And that's why I asked you.
Right. I'm going to cut in for.
I have a follow-up.
I just want to cut in for just 1 minute because something was said here that actually needs to be addressed.
I need to address something that was said.
Okay, all right, go ahead.
It's a follow-up to what I said. Dr. Levy-David, there's nothing personal here. I actually think the amphitheater was a better place. There's no question about that. I think it's a better place than the arena. The Klein isn't big enough. So the Klein was not an option to me. It's simply a matter of the procedure and us following the procedure. That's all. So I'm not questioning any of that.
The procedure being asked after graduation. I feel like I'm being treated differently.
No, ma'am. The graduation, as I understand it, Mr. Sokolovic or Ms. Baptiste Perez can explain it. That was done last year before I came on the board and according to a procedure or not. So they can explain that.
Well, in 22 years.
Yes, I'm gonna jump in, Dr. Levy-David. A moment.
About procedure because it makes it seem like the superintendent doesn't know what she's doing, doesn't have good judgment.
Pause for a minute. I'm leading this meeting. I'm asking for silence, please.
How we spend the dollars.
I'm asking for Dr. Levy-David, pause, please. We're getting off the agenda item. The agenda item is not, are we going to attack Dr. Levy-David? The
That's
agenda
fine.
item,
The agenda item is
you can,
tonight.
Dr. Levy David, please do not interrupt me. We as a board have been trying to solidify our policies and procedures, Ms. Baptiste Perez included, Mr. Albert Benahan included, everybody who's been on the board. We've had runaways with contracts and procedures not being followed. They're going to be followed. It's your job. It's your job as superintendent to follow them. Nobody's trying to persecute you. Nobody's trying to discipline you. This is an informative meeting to let everybody know, as I did when we sat down to breakfast, I'm very big on policy and some procedures. If you're going to play like you're being personally attacked when I question whether policies and procedures are followed, or if the board questions policies and procedures to followed, we're not going to have a good tenure. You go look back in every single minute. You'll see every single superintendent from, ma'am, you're interrupting me again, ma'am. Please do not do so. You will be recognized again to speak in a moment.
In saying that I'm playing and that I don't take policy.
Ma'am, I am speaking, ma'am. You have not been recognized to speak at this moment. Board members run the meetings. The superintendents do not run the meetings. Please be respectful. Thank you. This is not a personal attack on you as a superintendent. This is me fulfilling my fiduciary duties to the city of Bridgeport and the taxpayers. I want you to succeed. I want you to be successful as a superintendent. I will do everything in my power to make you successful for our students. But that involves following policies and procedures, which in this case, it may fall under a qualified purchase, but there is another building that could have been used. So in the future, I, as one of 9 board members, would like to not have a qualified purchase pushed when there is an actual another vendor, irregardless of what happened in the past. In the past, I had a very, very different board behind me that was not on board with enforcing policy and procedures, and we just started getting around to it in like 2019, 2020, where the board started becoming stronger on this and being better financial stewards for the city of Bridgeport and the state of Connecticut for our taxpayer dollars. That's all I want, is policies and procedures to be followed and treat each other with respect and not cut each other off. This is not an attack on Dr. Levy David. This is an attack on policies and procedures needing to be followed in every instance. Now, I'm aware you're a new a new superintendent who may not be familiar with all the policies and procedures, and that's okay. It's okay if there's a mistake made, if we own up to the mistake made. I mean, if a number wasn't even, we can't even, I mean, when Ms. Siegel was speaking, like ignoring that there was a whole other entity in this city that could fit 10,000 plus people, that's mind-boggling. There are 2 places. So under a non-qualified purchase over $2,500, we must seek at least 3 bids, and in this case, maybe 2, because there's only 2 vendors. So that's all I'm trying to do. And Mr. Benahan has not been recognized, and then I'll go back to you, Dr. Levy. Mr. Benahan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, everyone. Just listen to you, all of you and everything. I hope everybody respect my comment. This is not something I'm attacking, but we're talking about the situation about it's in your agenda. I can say this. I know we're talking about the money we spend about the convention, something that everybody like, everybody enjoy, everybody happy. And I believe Dr. Camila Levis Davis sent the message to everyone what is the plan and what you're going to do from Bridgeport. We're talking about this money, talking about what spending. But do we talk, do we find out, do we have report how much money spent when it was COVID-19? I know it's not the agenda, Mr. Chair, but I just want to put there. So if we're trying to figure it out, and I know the different schools, they have thousands of equipment of COVID-19 that expired right now. We cannot use it. You know how many thousand monies in the garbage. I just want to put them,
Yes,
Mr.
Mr.
Chair,
Bennett.
you can figure it out. I
Right.
just want to put
I'm
it
gonna
there
have
so
to
we
cut
can
you
talk
off,
about
Mr.
money.
Hanahan, because let's just stick to the agenda item, please, sir.
Okay, but I just want to put there so we can, in the next agenda, you can have that. We have all, you know, all the staff in the convention. And what I heard from the staff and community leaders and everyone, see, they never had something like that between 10, 50, 21 years. And I see it, and a lot of parents and a lot of, staff posted in the social media. They feel so happy and they enjoy so much. That's something positive that we have to say. The message was very clear. And I feel for 2 weeks that Camila Levy David be here, she learned and find out that she had to do something amazing. I mean, amazing convention. And also, I feel like she followed the procedure because she picked up one location and was, had to available that meet all the critics in the space, equality, and everyone. So we had to be sure and we had to be in the same page. Like I always said, everyone and my old friends and family, the people is watching us. They know how hard we work and we're not perfect. We try to do the best we can and we have to work together as a family. Yes, we have up and down. Yes, we need to follow the policy and the process and protocol. And I agree with you, Mr. Chair, and you're very good in that. But we had to see that the short time Dr. Levis David come here in Bridgeport, they put her in the table things that she said, wow, let's fix it, let me know. Because I know others formers, they will go crazy, leave, they say I can do it, and we'll be behind. I just want to put that for the record. Thank you, Mr. Chair. No more comments.
Yeah, before I get to you, Dr. Levy David, I did in fact watch the convocation online and I was very impressed. And I'm not questioning the convocation or the need for it, but it was just policy and procedure. I've made this clear. It's not anything sneaky or anything like that. And I apologize if you feel personally attacked, but that's not the case. And we could learn from this in the future to make sure we get 2 bids for anything over $2,500. And when the board was not on top of things before, that's no excuse for us not to be on top of things again, because we're trying to be better. Go ahead, Dr. Levy.
Sorry, I didn't hear.
Dr. Levy David, you want to speak again?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear my name.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Thank you. Thank you for waiting. Yes, you could. Yes,
Okay.
You're up. I recognize you now.
So what I take exception to is the fact that I did not do anything wrong. I went to the amphitheater. I looked for a space that would keep our people safe. COVID is surging in the Southwest right now and shutting down school districts. I wanted to have a space where we could all get together, celebrate, and kick off the year positively. This entire proceeding makes it look like I did something wrong, which I did not do anything wrong. And it seems like a bully pulpit to immediately begin picking away at the new superintendent. And I'm sorry if you feel that being a new superintendent is in some way makes me less competent, but I don't think it makes me less competent, sir. I knew exactly what I was doing in seeking a spot to have a convocation that met the needs of every single member of the staff. And I'm sorry, I do not agree with this conversation happening online when everyone has my phone number. If you had a concern, you could call me and say, Carmela, perhaps have you looked at the arena? I was right there. I saw the arena. I was at the client theater. I saw the theater. But nobody asked me that question. An agenda item was placed for public discussion. That's very personal. No one talked to me. No one has come and said, well, Carmela, these are the procedures. This is the way that we do things here. I've been here 3 weeks. And to chastise me publicly when you haven't taken the time to tell me, Carmela, these are the things that I want you to do this way is absolutely unfair, absolutely uncalled for, and very condescending. And I agree. I don't want to take it personally. I hope to be in Bridgeport for a very long time. But ultimately, that's not going to be my decision. That's going to be your decision.
Right. Okay. Now, just to address that, I see you, Ms. Baptiste, President. I'm sorry. Did I not email you about this a few days ago? I mean, before it took place. And did you not tell me you visited all 3 sites? And I was just concerned that you did not know you needed 2 bids, and it seems like even to get the price, it took a couple of emails to get the price of the thing, and then I'll share that publicly if you like, because I did have a conversation with you beforehand. So to act like this is just being sprung on you at the last moment, and it's been an agenda item for over a week and a half when I first asked. I put it on the agenda. But I think we're going to just keep going around in circles on this and this, but this is not a personal attack. This is something that's always been questioned. Contracts must be signed. Purchases must conform to the purchasing ordinances in the city of Bridgeport. Now, they may, if the city does in fact call this a qualified purchase with actually 2 people who could do it, that's all well and good, and that's on the city side. But this board has been hamstrung. We got attacked in the media over lemon bars that were not purchased. We got attacked in the media over and over and over again about these things. So I, for one, am going to be paying attention to policy and procedures as I did under the former superintendent, as I did under the superintendent before that, as I did under the superintendent before that. Sometimes the only voice that was bringing it up. This is no different. So if you're feeling personally attacked, then I personally attacked Dr. Arrested Johnson. Then I personally attacked Superintendent Michael Testani. Then I personally attacked our last superintendent as well. But that has not been the case. I have been consistent. If anybody says I'm not consistent, and I haven't always been like this towards every single superintendent, every single policy and procedure, they're lying to you. Okay, Ms. Baptiste Perez.
Thank you, Mrs. Sokolovic. This is an embarrassment to the district to bring it up in this manner. And while we may feel that the board has improved, and to a certain extent, I agree, you have also personally attacked former Chair John Weldon. This is a reflection of poor leadership amongst the board, poor leadership by the chair, by not communicating with the superintendent of some, if not the full expectations of the board, but at least pet peeves on day one. Because I do agree, we do have pet peeves. There are precedent of numerous contracts that's been passed by Superintendent Testani that was executed and not brought by the proper procedures in front of the board. There have been numerous contracts that were brought under interim Superintendent Alicia Perrin that was not brought in front of the Board of Education. And so day one of August 1, when Dr. Carmela Levy-David's here, for the chair to not have a discussion of pet peeves or minimal, some expectations, and say that we're going to wait till September 6th, it is not necessarily a fair process. This conversation of what we're expecting as a Board of Education with our superintendent should have happened early. It should have been communicated by each one of us by our individual meetings, but also first and foremost with the chair. And if that hasn't been done, and I don't want to disclose to the public other things, but if there's a lack of communication from our head leadership as a board as to what to expect coming in, that is a reflection of us and not necessarily of the new qualified superintendent. And so I hear what you're saying, but if our leadership and if we have not communicated this issue to then bring it up to the public as an agenda item, it is an embarrassment to us. Because if you've personally attacked other superintendents, but you've also personally attacked the leadership. And I don't see that happening. The next thing I do want to say is that you mentioned that she mentioned that via email to you that she did review the other 3 locations. So I think a reasonable communication would have been why the amphitheater, and that could have been done without having a public meeting. I think there is a legitimate concern based off of news articles with the resurgence of COVID. I just received a CNN article from a friend of mine. So an outdoor venue, given potential health concerns, could be is a legitimate and reasonable reason. And then that would leave it as the only outdoor venue that could accommodate all staff for an all-day event. Then there's one thing. I wasn't necessarily sure that the parking lot for the amphitheater can be used for total mortgage. So I had made sure I noted that. It is true, the total mortgage arena, formerly known as Webster Bank, was used in the past. But again, if we were looking for something that's outdoor, and I think really timing is of the essence. In terms of getting the event done, coordination. And if we're really so concerned with costs, like we had no keynote speaker costs associated with the event, that this is embarrassing. We had the first, and mind you, I had the opportunity to watch previous convocations. And this was the first time when I left the arena, I saw different school districts, teachers, mascots. They were dancing off the field, driving out the parking lot, with showing so much district pride, that to have this meeting now about this topic, especially after it being highly successful, it could have been another, again, I just think it's a conversation and embarrassing to the district. I think it's poor leadership amongst us as the Board of Education, and reflective of the chair's poor leadership and not communicating at least some of our qualms. I think waiting till September 6th for us to say, hey, this is what we expect of you, and having meetings where we start to criticize the superintendent is wrong. And I really don't want to push us back when we have all the potential to go forward beyond what's been measured in the past. And so if considering the health factors involved, there's only one outdoor arena. It's under the $25,000 threshold. We received the quote. Dr. Levy-David, because of past superintendents and dishonesty on the board, this is a pet peeve that we are highly sensitive to as a Board of Education, and we are now seeking to have some legitimization and our strong leadership. And so I hope that the chair communicates with you on a weekly basis of our concerns. I hope that us as board members reach out to you in a non-disparaging and in a respectful manner, because really, we hired you based off of your qualification, based off of your leadership. You're coming from a larger district, more diverse, more facilities, with a background in finance. I expect you to come here and lay the groundwork and market and lead our district to a better place. And so far, that's what I've seen. We need to be able to communicate better as board members and not have it as a public item and spend an hour in a meeting for an event that pretty much helps set the district off on the right path and have more attendance and views than what was ever done in the past.
Is that all, Ms. Baptiste, for us?
That's all I have for now.
Mr. Benahan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, again. I agree with what Ms. Baptiste said. Let's keep forward, and I want to say this, that we all know, and you're absolutely correct, Mr. Chair, about the policy and protocol, and I agree with you. As I said before, you're a master of that, and we agree. I'm not against that. But sometimes we spend money and things for board education that we say, how, when, why, when this happened, who did this, who made the decision, why we spending this when we need this. And then Dr. Camila Davis said doing something that the community, parents, students, staff, that's what they want to see. That's what they want to hear. Because we know in the beginning, we were talking the communication. While she doing the change, everybody was nervous. As a board member, we asked questions. Staff was really nervous. And she bring that message so positive. The way everybody won, why we had to make this issue more. Because we spent this money exactly what we want. As I said, and I can send you the information and screenshot for all staff say they never see something so amazing. They get out from there positive, talking. My phone was not stopping, calling me, text me how amazing the convention was. So I feel, as Ms. Christina said, we hire her because she's qualified. She's a good heart. And I'm gonna repeat the same word she said. She married with us. She's from Bridgeport. She wanna work. She wanna listen, and she said something very important. Her priority right now is the students, work with parents and staff to get better at Bridgeport. And she's gonna fight for Bridgeport. And you guys know that I put my head before from formers, and I did the mistake. And I'm not doing the mistake this time because I know she can do it. I just want to say that for the record. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, if there's nothing else on this item, going once, going twice. Seeing none, let's move on to the next agenda item, the budget timeline for 24-25. Oh, Mr. Traber, I'm sorry, I did not see your hand. Go ahead, Mr. Traber. You're muted.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to emphasize what I said already. There's entirely too much posturing going on here. This is not meant, Dr. Carmela Levy-David, to be a criticism. This is meant to be a quick review of process for very deep-seated reasons that have nothing to do with you. That have to do with the history in this city that you have stepped into. So it is unfortunate that it is coming out the way it's coming out, because this was a good event. I believe you probably picked the best one, and you would have, had procedure been followed, ended up in the same place. So this should have been a quick agenda item to review the procedure. But it is important to us that we get and stick to those procedures because of past that has, again, nothing to do with you, but is important in the future for us to continue down that path that we've begun to move down. So I think that that's really important to keep in mind. And I look forward to continuing to work with you. And this should not be the way it's being portrayed. I would agree with everyone else about the amphitheater and the event in the amphitheater as being a nice occasion and a good way to start the year. But I do think the importance of us having policies that we respect and follow so that people don't question the honesty and veracity of this board is also very important, in the integrity of this board and the leadership of this school administration. So we all need to be working and pulling in the same direction on that. So that's all I have to say. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Now let's move on to the next agenda item, please. Budget timeline 24-25. Ms. Siegel, take it away, please.
Right, thank you. I do want to take a moment to acknowledge that on the call tonight is Patricia St. Louis with me, who is the manager of budget and financial reporting. So I did want to acknowledge Patricia. So
I think you muted yourself, Ms. Siegel. Ms. Siegel, I think you muted yourself. Can anybody hear Ms. Siegel?
No, she's not mute. Something's wrong with the connection.
All right, let's.
She looks frozen, actually.
Can somebody contact Ms. Siegel and tell her she's frozen,
Yeah.
please?
Yeah, she's frozen. Yes, she is.
I'm sorry, I lost the
Okay,
connection for a second. Sorry about that.
no worries.
All right, I think
Continue.
we're connected. We're connected now. Okay,
Yes.
very good. Very good. All right. So on the screen, I have the annual budget timeline 2024-25. It's mock draft with tentative dates. The dates are tentative because some of the dates are dependent upon the actual city calendar. I hope everyone had the opportunity to read through it. It's similar to prior years. I'm just going to scroll through it in the interest of time and highlight some of the major events. And so, as you're aware, right now, we are still engaged in closing out the prior year, 22-23. And as soon as that happens next week, and we're well into the start of another school year in September, I begin work on the 24-25 budget plan and all of the requirements for that plan. And so in October and November, I actually started in September, we developed the initial operating plan, calculate the monetary need, and also look at a budget plan for food and nutrition services. In December, usually after Thanksgiving, I'm ready to share the plan with the superintendent, consult, have input, and of course, the superintendent can make decisions on some of the items that may be subject to discussion. And by January, we're ready to present the budget request to the board. And as you are aware, there is an operating gap because the district has received on average approximately 1% growth in operating funds per year. So we also identify a gap plan. Also in the fall term, usually in October, November, we begin work on the register projections and position allocations for the following year based on the available data. And so by January, we have register projections ready. The superintendent may decide to seek input from constituency groups. That has happened in the past, so it's on the calendar. And then in January, we would present the initial budget request and the budget plan for food and nutrition services to the Finance Committee. And then at a board meeting in January, sometimes it happens at the first meeting in February, but we aim for January, we would present to the full board and the public the budget request for the operating budget, along with the budget plan for food and nutrition. Food and nutrition, just as a reminder, is completely funded by the federal and state funds for food services, and it operates like a business in a profit loss scenario. Great. There's also a parallel capital budget request, which is prepared by the facilities department. It's coordinated by them. It can also include requests for technology. But generally, the city primarily funds all right, I've just been told you can't see my screen. I apologize. I thought it was shared. Let me check on that. Sorry about that. All right. Yeah, can you see my screen?
Yes.
All right, very good. All right, so we have the capital request. And I was indicating that usually the capital request primarily consists of facilities items, major items such as roof repair or replacement of a roof or replacement of a boiler, which are of considerable cost. The superintendent conducts with the board involvement community forums on the budget. It's an opportunity to explain to the public how the budget is constructed, along with an explanation of the operating gap and how we close that gap. The mayor formulates a city budget, which of course includes the city contribution to the board, and that's in the mid-February to mid-March timeframe. And at that point, superintendent would confer with the mayor on the monetary need for the board and the requested city share of the budget. And then usually at a either in January when the budget is presented or in February, the board would give the final approval of the request of the budget request. Last year, I believe it happened in January, but mid-February would be the absolute deadline. And then in March 1st, the mayor submits the capital budget to the city council. The mayor submits the general fund budget to the city council April 1st. And then usually in the third week of April, we all meet with the city budget appropriations committee to discuss the plan, present our rationale for the requested city share, and offer our recommendations for the city share and how it should be constructed. And then in April and May, decisions are being made at the federal and state levels about funding at the state level for State Alliance, ECS, the Education Cost Share Appropriation, and major grants. By early May, the City Council submits the adopted budget to the mayor. By May 24th, that's an approximate date, that's the last day for the mayor to veto the City Council's adopted budget. On May 31st, that's the last day for the City Council to vote on the mayor's veto, if a veto took place. And then in May and June, I would be finalizing the initial, not final, but initial budget gap plan so that we can meet the monetary need. And that could be shared at that time, or we can wait until September as we're doing this in this current cycle. And I'll have more to share about that in a few moments when we move on to the next topic. And then in the summer, as we work on the end of year close, we're also setting up the new accounts for the new year, and we are receiving the various grant appropriations. I'm going to be summarizing for you in the next topic the grant appropriations that we've received to date. And as of today, we still do not have all of them. Some appropriations are not released until the end of August, which is next week, or September. And then in September, we can present our final gap plan based on the final data for the prior year. And that will incorporate updated fiscal projections and assumptions based on the latest available data for both operating and grant resources. So that is a quick summary of the timeline for 24-25. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Siegel. I'll start it off. Yeah, there's a very good presentation of the timeline. And the community forums are especially important for our new board member and new committee member, Ms. Perez, and our new superintendent. The way the community forums have traditionally been done was we would collaborate with the superintendent on the forum. I would propose some language to be added to the slides that we would speak on, and it would be a joint forum, just so that's clear ahead of time. And it's been done under 3 previous superintendents, and that's the way it's finance chair that I'm going to do it. At times we had to call it as a committee meeting because at one time we did have what would be known as a recalcitrant board who did not want to hold a community forum, and because it would bring too much pressure on politicians who approve our budget. but that's the way we've traditionally done it. Board members and everybody here could attest to that. It's a community forum led by the superintendent and the board members to advocate for the money and to inform the public of our needs. Okay, I'll open it up to committee members. Ms. Baptiste Perez, anything?
No, it's a very informative timeline. I agree with what you mentioned about our community forums and getting the community involved. Just one comment. I just keep having the dogs bark, but I'm just looking forward to some changes we can do with the community forum and working with the superintendent to have higher attendance. So, our turnouts have not been significant as a district with approximately 20,000 students. So I think that's an area that we can work on. So that way we can have better advocacy. And probably another one of our expectations is more effective advocacy with earning more funds for the school district, Dr. Levy David. But that's all I have to say about this.
Absolutely, I agree about the attendance, especially. Ms. Perez?
No questions at this time.
Mr. Benahan, you had your hand up before. Do you still have a question or a comment?
No, no question at this moment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Traber?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Siegel, I heard you say that soon or in the near future, we would get a final count on how much money we got out of the last legislative session. What do we know at this point?
I'm going to discuss the latest information in the next topic.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I'll wait. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, if there's no further questions or comments on budget timeline, I will hear an update on the remaining ESSER and ARP funds related expenditures.
Ms. Sukovic, may I suggest that I start with the preview of the preliminary close for 22-23 and 23-24, because I've incorporated the ESSER information into the summary presentation.
Yes, ma'am, that's appropriate. I would like to make a motion to change the agenda item to number 5 rather than number 4. Presentation. Just need a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, take it away,
Aye.
Ms. Siegel.
Thank you. I just need a moment to bring up the next document. Right. Is the screen large enough?
I could enlarge mine. I don't know if maybe it should be larger for the public, maybe.
All right, let's go to 75. Right.
Yeah, that's better.
All right. Thank you. So this evening, I'm going to present a preliminary report on the end of year close and 23-24. I'm not going to present actual numbers tonight because we're still working on the close. It will not occur until August 31st officially. And then in September, when I present the final plan, all the numbers will be final and accurate. So to begin, for 22-23, the end of year close will occur on August 31st. That's next week on Thursday. So the financial condition report as of June 30th will then be posted after the end of year close, and that will be after Labor Day. I'm aiming for September 5th. The EFS reports, EFS is Education Finance System. Those reports, unaudited, as of 9/1/23, will be completed on time by 9/1, as is required by the state. And they will be posted to the website. And then once the audit is completed by December 31st, the final reports will be posted on January 1st or thereabout. We will also post the 23-24 allocation model, as we do every year, and the budget plan. Now, for the close, in terms of the operating budget, I had reported previously that we had withdrawn $5 million from the Internal Service Fund reserve in order to ensure sufficient funds to balance the operating budget. At this time, we're pleased to report that we're projecting that the final amount will be under $5 million, and that we should be able to return some money to the ISF reserves. So I'm going to ask you to wait until we actually close, and then we'll report on the actual amount that we're able to return. Now, you may be asking, well, what factors contributed to the reduced amount? Because we always project or aim to project higher so that we can have a cushion and make certain, hopefully, that we have sufficient funds and can balance appropriately. So I've just listed a few of the factors. We did have a one-time ARP, meaning ESSER, pre-K grant, which reduced the excess cost of the pre-K classes that are charged to Title I. So we don't receive sufficient funding for our pre-K classes. We receive $108,000 from the state for a teacher and a para. So we fund over $2 million in Title I in excess cost. So we did have this supplemental grant. It may come again in 23-24, and that will be very helpful. But we're not anticipating that it will be repeated in the subsequent year, 24-25. But it will be helpful in the current year in terms of conserving resources. And so we were also able to leverage very successfully, as we do every year, remaining balances in grants ending June 30th so that we could reduce our operating expenses in the operating budget. The utilities expense was lower than originally projected, so that is good news. We'll be monitoring utilities very carefully. There will be an increase in cost this year, as we discussed in prior months, due to the major increase in the amount per kilowatt hour. But the good news is that the city locked in a rate through, I believe it's through 25 or part of 26. And so the increase that occurs in 23-24 should hold stable into 24-25. And legal services was again at a relatively low level. And as I've discussed with the board in the past, we have to start off with $900,000 to $1 million on that line because we never know whether there are going to be any settlements. And if there aren't, then we have funds that we can either redirect or we have savings at the end. Moving on, food and nutrition services. So we are projecting a surplus. And as I've discussed in the past, we structure the budget plan for food and nutrition so that there should be a surplus. There should be a surplus of at least $1 million because that is the amount that we project as the food and nutrition contribution to the Internal Service Fund for the food and nutrition retirees, for their retirees. And so there is a surplus. I'll report on the exact amount once we close and we're ready to report in September. So that is, again, good news. And from that amount, we will take a contribution once again, as expected and as planned, for the retirees and for supplementation of the workers' comp fund. There is an actuarial report that was shared with us by the city finance director, which indicates that there could be future workers' comp claims of considerable magnitude, and so we can add funding from the budget into the internal service fund for not only the retirees, but for supplementing the workers' comp resources. Now, I just want to remind everyone that the dollars that go into the fund for the retirees and the workers' comp supplement, those funds belong to the district, and the funds for the retirees belong to the district because at the start of every year, we have to make a payment into the internal service fund for all retirees. And so at the end of the year, when there's a surplus in the food and nutrition budget, they have to reimburse the district, right? So those funds that go into the internal service fund that are designated, that I designate for the retirees and for workers' comp supplementation belong to the district. Now, the balance would then be on reserve for food and nutrition, restricted to food and nutrition only. So food and nutrition is funded solely by federal and state grants, primarily federal grants that flow through the state. And we must comply 100% with regulations governing the use of those funds. So the funds that they generate must be used for the benefit of the food service program in Bridgeport. So when we calculate the balance, that balance is restricted to their use. We are keeping track of their funds, and we are making certain that those funds are used only and strictly for the benefit of the food service program. Now, they did order a new vehicle last year. It's at a cost of $174,395. And we made a deposit of $110,000 in 22-23. So we do have to pay that balance. We had the full amount last year. And so in 23-24, we will bring back to the budget $64,395, the balance due from the surplus that was deposited in the internal service fund. So where do we stand with the internal service fund? Again, this is just a quick projection. It's all good news. And I'll present final numbers in September. So I have shared previously that we currently have 28 million on deposit for the board. We are then going to add to that the food and nutrition contribution for the retirees and the workers' comp supplement. We're then going to return some money from the $5 million withdrawal. And we also have verified that there was an internal surplus once again for the second consecutive year in the internal service fund. So you may be asking, well, what is that? So the internal service fund is the depository for the employer core share and the employee core share of health insurance. It's also the depository for the funds contributed toward the workers' compensation claims. So it's basically those two purposes. And it's the depository for those funds, and it's the conduit for making the payments. All right. So we think of the internal service fund as health insurance plus workers' comp primarily. All right. Now, last year, I reported that there was an internal surplus that developed for both the city and the board. It was around 3 million. And I said to you then, there's no guarantee that there will be another surplus in the next year. Fortunately, and we were surprised, but this is most welcome, there was an internal surplus of $6.4 million. And I believe the city also had an internal surplus. So why did this happen? Well, I don't have an exact answer. It's the same answer that I had last year, which is that once those funds are deposited, I think there are two primary factors. One is that the cost share for the retirees was probably overestimated by the actuaries. And the second is that the cost of workers' comp in these early years may have been overestimated. Now, according to the actuarial report, the costs will rise going into the future. So, but right now there's 6.4 million. So there's 34.4 plus the food nutrition contribution, which I will report on in exact terms in September, and plus the dollars that we will return once we are able to close. Right? And keep in mind that these funds are going to be used to close the gap in the current year and close the gap in 24-25 as well. Now, for food and nutrition, the prior balance was about 3.1 million. We're going to be adding money from the surplus. And so they'll have 3.1 plus the funds added that are restricted to food and nutrition. And as I indicated, that restriction will be strictly enforced. So in summary, we're very pleased with how the close has been proceeding. It's another successful end of year close. And I think we're going to be very pleased with the final outcome in terms of being able to ensure a balanced budget in the current year, 23-24, and hopefully into 24-25. But there are many variables still to be addressed. Moving on to 23-24, our current year. So the city budget was increased by $2.5 million. The state budget, Alliance ECS, had an increase of $3,264,563, bringing Alliance ECS up from 24,763,531 to 28,029,094. So you may be looking at this and saying, well, weren't we supposed to get $3.5 million or 3,496? Yes, and in fact, we did. However, you'll remember that we spoke about the increasing educator diversity grant, and that is not new money. That grant is populated with money by diverting funds from Alliance ECS. And you'll recall that the original law specified that it would be 10% of the increase in Alliance ECS from 1920 to 23-24. So if that had happened, we would have had to divert $756,000. So in the last legislative session, they did modify the law. And you can see the statement here. The law changed the timing of a provision that lowers the amount of Alliance District funding that must be used for minority teacher recruitment. Now, it doesn't specify, or we have not received a written communication from the state yet, should be coming soon, of the exact calculation. However, we did receive the appropriation, and so we know that the Alliance amount, I'm just going to scroll down to this chart, that the Alliance amount for the diversity grant, increasing educator diversity, is 232,354. So I extrapolated, and I think that the formula they used is 7%, because this was the original amount, 3496917, And that is very close to the amount we thought we were going to receive. So 7% is the 232,354. That's the number they told us is for the Alliance Diversity Grant. And then the balance is ours. So you'll recall that I had indicated in the current year, it's not going to have a major impact on our operating resources because we had resources in ARP ESSER specifically targeted to university partnerships to increase recruitment and diversity. And so we've redeployed those funds to other services so that we could use the diversity funds for the university partnerships, and then reduced the Alliance grant and move the we were able to identify eligible services for ESSER and move those services out of Alliance because it was lower than the 3.5 million, and move those services into ESSER. So we just did an exchange. However, starting in 24-25, as reported previously, the diverted amount would no longer be available to fund teacher positions and other critical services in Alliance ECS. So we have to cover that gap. Now, I just want to reemphasize, we have not yet received official guidelines from the state. So I continued to write in the notes that the diverted amount is going to rise in each subsequent year. I don't have the final guidelines from the state, so I don't know what's going to happen next year. I'm simply estimating and projecting at this point, and I'm assuming it's going to be 7%. If the guidelines have a different interpretation, we will abide by the new interpretation and report to you about it. But in 24-25, the increase in Alliance is supposed to be about 8 million. So if we have to divert 7%, that would be $560,000. But again, we don't know. We don't know yet. We haven't seen the official guidelines. We do know that for this year, we have in the diversity grant, we're going to be spending $232,354 on various types of university programs, including we expect cross-certification programs, which are already in operation to increase educator diversity. So now we're going to move on to 23-24 grants, and I can share with you what we know at this time. So in Title I, we did have a loss, and I'm seeing an error here. I apologize for that. Just give me 1 second. Thought this was correct, so I'm just going to check it. Title I did decline, and I'm looking at this all the time, so I guess when I look at it, I'm seeing the lower number. So I'm just going to update that in a moment. Let's get the lower number here. Okay. Back to this. Okay. All right. So last year it was 14,358,691, and in the new year it's 14,048,071. So that's a difference of 310,620. But something else has happened. The non-public count count increased by about 200 students. There is a complex formula that has to be used. It's calculated in what's called a ranking worksheet in order to determine the amount due to the non-public schools from the total allocation for their eligible students. And so the amount that we had to deduct for the non-public schools also increased, and that was 106,817. So we've actually gone down by about $427,000. Now, I was expecting a decline. I hoped that it would not come, but the reason I was expecting it is because the population had declined over the years, and Title I is always behind by at least a year in terms of enrollment. Now, it's not going to impact us in terms of having to make any adjustments in our plan because we were able to roll unused funds from last year within the limits that are allowed. And so we have the funding. And that's one of the reasons I've shared with you in the past for striving to roll money when allowed. Because if there's a decline in the following year, then you don't have to, hopefully you can absorb the decline. Now, we don't have Title II yet. Title III is the federal program for English language learners, and that is up by $70,573. That is just enough to cover escalated costs. It doesn't even cover the cost of a teacher. I was hoping that it would be much higher in light of the growth in the ELL population, but it wasn't. Title IV has declined, so that was disappointing. State bilingual, again, is for bilingual and English language instruction. That came up by 11,748. Again, that's very, very low amount. Now, the state priority grant, which had been declining every year, again declines, but by a minimal amount. In total, $2,699. The main losses are in the main component, about 5,000. Extended school hours, 1,349. And interestingly, the summer grant increased. So there is a net loss. It's minimal. So that's what we know about those particular grants at this time. Now, in adult education, let's move this down. Okay. In adult education, which of course is dedicated only for adult education, there usually is an increase every year. So there again is an increase. Pay attention to the state column because that is the state grant. So that is up by $112,959, which basically covers the escalated costs because there are some staff members funded in that grant, and it also funds the hourly services for the extended for the daily programs and the evening programs that they conduct. The local share is up, but that doesn't mean that we have additional money. It just means that we can charge the escalated costs of the services in the local share, which basically are the director of adult education, some staff positions in the staff positions for administering the program, as well as the rental of the site, utilities, and the in-kind services such as the custodial fees for the use of rooms at the various school buildings that are also used. But any increase is a positive development. Now, aquaculture. So aquaculture receives a grant which flows, it doesn't flow as a grant, it flows into our operating budget. It's an offset to the cost of operating aquaculture. And you can see the budget history here. In 15-16, the allocation declined, and then it declines again and again. Then we have some increases. And now we've had 2 successive years of decreases of significant magnitude. And so most current decrease, which is due to lower enrollment, is 259,151. So we've worked with David Henry, who is the director of aquaculture, and he was able to reduce the budget by about 150,000. And we'll continue to support the operations by offsetting the balance. For the following year, we've already discussed a contingency plan, but there were certain changes that just could not be made in the current year. We had to maintain a viable program. And he will be working to increase enrollment, of course. So in the current year, what are some factors that we have to address? As I've reported in the past, we have to be mindful that our average teacher salary is increasing, and that's important because we want to remain highly competitive with other districts. And due to the labor shortage, we have been hiring more experienced teachers, so they're coming in at higher steps than in the past. So this is just a factual statement, and we have to keep it in mind as we evaluate the budgetary variables so that we can balance the budget. Transportation costs will increase by 4.25% in year 2 of our 5-year agreement with We Transport, and that was in our projected monetary need. Special ed costs continue to rise despite a reduction in the out-of-district seats. There are efforts underway to try and reduce costs wherever possible, but we have to provide mandated services. So when I speak about rising costs, I'm speaking about higher speech service needs. We added 5 occupational therapist positions in 2 years. We have 12 teacher positions in ESSER, which we're going to have to move into the operating budget in 24-25. We have 63 individual one-to-one paras. For the out-of-district placements, while we have an overall reduction in the total number, we have a higher cost for the students who have been placed because we had a reduced excess cost grant in 22-23. Why? Because the NCEP, the net current expenditures per pupil, increased to 18,757. Well, that was due to the infusion of the ESSER grants. And the cap went up to 23.75, up from 18.02. So just as a reminder, we have to pay 4.5 times the NCEP plus the cap times the balance between the 4.5 times the NCEP and the total cost of the placement. So it's good news that the out-of-district placements have declined. We're hopeful they'll continue to decline. That's an excellent outcome. It's reflective of the excellent efforts that have been made to keep students in district. It did come down by 40 compared to last year. Our gross cost, which includes in our records the charter school sped payments, that remained, interestingly, about the same, but the net cost rose. So we did have an additional $1 million cost compared to last year. And again, why did that happen? Because of the reduction in the excess cost grant. So we have to understand, even though the out-of-district placements decline, and that's a positive outcome, we want that to continue, that doesn't necessarily mean that we gained in revenue the cost of those placements, because our excess cost grant declined, and our net cost actually rose by $1 million. And the cost of those placements increases due to inflationary factors each year. Now, we spoke in June about the state funding for the excess cost grant, and it was announced that the total state appropriation was increased by about $25 million. Well, that's $25 million at the states, and that may benefit us if the local share percentage, that cap after the 4.5 times the NCEP is reduced. But the outcome is going to be dependent upon the number of students and the cost factors statewide. So I don't know yet whether we're going to have a benefit from it. We should. It seems logical that we will get some benefit, but we cannot predict with any certainty at this time the amount. And any increase in special ed revenue will be applied first to offset the growth in special ed expenses. So if we do get an additional funding in this area, we're going to use that to offset the increase in the expenses, and looking ahead to 24-25, and we have to bring back those positions and services from ESSER, we're going to look to reduce the impact on the operating budget. Now, what about English language learners? Well, the number of ESL teachers has risen in 4 years from 34.6 positions to 41 to 45, and we now have 48. Right? The number of bilingual program assistants has risen from 5 to 10. Now, we fund the bilingual program assistants in Title I. So we did that in order to attempt to achieve a degree of sustainability. But there are ESL teachers in the ESSER grants. So this is last year's, these are last year's charts. And you can see that we ended with special ed enrollment at 20%. We ended with L enrollment at 27.54%. These are extremely high numbers. I don't know if they're the highest in the state, but they certainly have to be in the higher tier. Right. Now, our plan for 23-24 will be finalized after we close, as I indicated. So let's look forward to that in September. Now we'll move on to ESSER. So ESSER 2.
Ms. Siegel.
Yes.
Siegel?
Yes.
I'm sorry. Can we pause there for some questions before? Because we got a lot of information to absorb from the first portion, and it is a separate exec.
Yes, absolutely. This is a good stopping point. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Questions on what was given so far, Ms. Baptiste Perez?
No questions. Wait, sorry.
No worries.
Can I have a copy of this, like an actual physical copy, sent to my email, just so I could kind of digest it more?
I can share it with the superintendent's office, and the superintendent would, after review, share it through the portal.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that, Ms. Baptiste Perez. And could you send it to the entire board as well, because this is a lot to digest and to look at.
I believe Rita would handle that. Rita, are you on the call? All right, I'll confer with her afterwards.
Thank you.
I am.
There you are.
Ms. Perez.
No questions at this time.
Mr. Benahan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question for Marlene Siegel. Ms. Siegel, you were saying in the beginning something about the truck, the vehicle they buy. Is the same truck about the former director he buy? It's about this was the freezer, or this is another one?
I believe you're referring to the purchase of the new vehicle. Am I correct?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
I believe it's a truck or a type of delivery vehicle.
But it's new one this year, or we're talking about the one last year that the former director he said?
It's a brand new vehicle that they had to go out for bid. They had to identify a vendor. They went out for bid through the city purchasing office.
But it's a new year for 2023, right? Ms. Siegel?
Are we back in the meeting?
Yeah, this is
Everyone-
frozen.
Yeah, I'm not sure what happened.
Ms. Siegel,
All right.
we can hear you, but we can't see you.
Oh. My camera went off,
You're back.
unknown to me. So, all right, thank you.
Ms. Siegel, my last
So-
question was if that vehicle is for this year, 2023.
The new, it's a brand new vehicle. It was, they do not have it yet. It was ordered in 22-23, but
Right.
in order to order it, they first had to go out for bid with the Office of City Purchasing. So that took several weeks or more than a month, as I recall. And then once they placed the order, we had to secure from the vendor an invoice for the deposit. So it's about $174,000. The deposit was $110,000. So they paid $110,000 on deposit in 22-23. They owe about $64,395 to best of my recollection. And so the vehicle is being built, will be finished in 23-24. I don't know yet if it's already complete or not. I don't know what the expected delivery date is, but it will be completed, I would expect, in the no later than the fall term. And then the balance will be paid and they will have the new vehicle.
All right, thank you, Ms. Siegel. No more question, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Sure. You're welcome.
Mr. Traver, any questions?
No questions, Mr. Chair.
Okay, that brings me to my questions. Could you explain a little more, because we've got some new people on the board and the new superintendent again. The internal service fund balance is quite significant in some people's eyes, and we get this every time we advocate for the budget. Why don't we just spend down all the excess money instead of like living through budget cuts and deficit prevention mode and all this? What is the reason we hold that money back?
Yes. Well, we let's remember first how the money came to be. So in the pandemic years, when full instruction was not in place, all of the usual services were not in place, and there were cost savings. So the funds were saved and accumulated. Now, we intentionally accumulated the funds because we knew at a point in the future when ESSER funding would end that we would need those funds to ensure to be applied to balance a budget. Now, in the prior year, 22-23, as I indicated, we withdrew $5 million in order to close the operating budget. I did say that we expect we're going to need less because we did an excellent job of leveraging our resources and engaging in cost control and effective cost management. And so we believe that number is going to be lower than 5 million, and we'll return some funds. For 23-24, our current year, let's remember that we have escalated expenses. We have escalated expenses for utilities, for transportation, and most importantly, for salaries and health insurance and the retirement fund for non-certified staff. And so for 23-24, as I will show you in September, we may have to withdraw 11 to 13 million. Now, I'm hopeful I'll be able to reduce it again, as we did in this year, and maybe in the end it'll be 10. But at the early part of the fiscal year, we have to project at a higher point. So we may have to withdraw 11 to 13 million. And then in each year, we have to look backwards and ask, well, what did we have to withdraw in order to balance? And then we need that same amount as a starting point in order to balance in the new year, right? So if we had to withdraw 3 million in 22-23, then in 23-24, we're going to need at least 3 million plus our escalated costs, after taking into account, of course, any cost savings and any other compensating factors. And looking ahead to 24-25, if we had to withdraw 3 million in 22-23, and let's just use round numbers, if we have to withdraw 10 million in 23-24, well, that would be 10 plus 3, 13 million. So we're going to need 13 million to start in 24-25, right? So in 24-25, we're going to have to close 3 components. Those three components will consist of the gap that we closed previously with one-time funds from the internal service fund, the escalated costs, and the third component would be the services from the ESSA grant and the funds diverted to increasing educated diversity, which, by the way, is an outstanding goal and certainly a goal that we agree with and that we want to, pursue. But we need to also have funding for our essential services. So the monetary need is going to will consist of these three major components: the escalated costs, the gap that we.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Siegel. You answered that question adequately. Thank you.
Thank you.
My next question is actually you just led me perfectly into a nice segue. Is the diversity funds? Can we back up to that for a moment, please? Because I've got
yes, certainly. Okay.
Very good, thank you. Yeah, this has just recently become a very big pet peeve for me. It's really more of a statement. Definitely the recruitment of minority teachers and stuff is something I've been harping on and pushing for in the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. And it's an area where, while still not at the goal, that Bridgeport Public Schools is doing the best as far as recruitment, as far as our percentages when compared to every other district. Now, my problem with this diversity grant, which you could agree, Ms. Siegel, this is not a grant, this is a clawback of funds. They're withholding part of the money from a minority, and this is only in alliance districts, which are mostly minority schools, which are already underfunded. The rest of the districts, Greenwich and all these other districts, they don't have such an amount withheld, and they are worse off in recruitment, yet they have no rule to make them spend that much money on recruitment. And this is taking away from providing services from our other students, which we could be using this money elsewhere. So if anybody talks to their state representatives and all this stuff, this needs to be fixed, because it's kind of upsetting. And then that's what I just wanted to say about that. And could we look at that was just really a statement. Could we go to the non-public school amounts, please? And these are schools that we're required to fund out of Title I funding that's given to us for schools that we don't oversee.
We're required by law within the Title I allocation to calculate the amount due to non-public schools serving Bridgeport students who are eligible for Title I. So there is a formula sheet. It's called the ranking worksheet. And the total amount based on the number of eligible students that they have and a per capita that I have to calculate is over 600,000. Last year it was about 550. This year it's about 650. And I included in the chart the exact increase in compared to last year. Now their eligible count increased by about 200 students. Keep in mind that Bridgeport has been losing public school students. Our population last year, I believe, was slightly higher than the year before, and we're anticipating an increase this year. But we did lose a significant number during the pandemic years.
Right. And that leads me into my next question. As far as losing students, there's something I think we need to get ahead of as far as the 24-25 school year and going forward. I mean, it's being talked about, but it's not at a critical mass. The new kindergarten age cutoff is going to basically lower our enrollment in kindergarten, increase our enrollment in pre-K. So we're going to need corresponding grants for pre-K, and going to have to take into account we may have less students that first year who, as they matriculate, will keep our school population down, which may have an impact on funding.
Yeah, I'm going to mention that in the next section.
Okay, thank you. All right. Mr. Benahan has his hands up. Mr. Benahan, would you like to ask another question? You're on mute, Mr. Benahan, if you're trying to speak. Okay. Mr. Benahan going once, going twice. Okay, if he comes on with his question, we can start, but go ahead and get started on the next item, unless anybody else has a question, but I don't see any hands. Okay.
Should I move on?
Yes, please, Ms. Seawood.
Okay, thank you. In terms of the ESSER grant, ESSER 2 expires September 30th. However, we have closed it as of June 30th. All funds are expended, and you can see the grand total was $44,640,438 in 21-22. There was an expenditure of about $21,700. That left the balance of about $22,900. And we started off the year in 22-23 with $22,900, and that grant is now closed. So in 23-24, our current year, we now have ARP ESSER. We also have some other ESSER grants for the Juvenile Detention Center, for students who are parenting teens. We have another grant for the homeless, and another ARP priority grant. So all those are going to expire September 30th of 24. Some will be closed. Most will be closed as of June 30th of 24, but some will we will keep open in order to leverage our resources to optimal advantage. So ARP ESSER was $100,326,498. In 21-22, we expended about $28.2 million. We had a balance of $80.1 million. And in 22-23, we actually had well over $30 million. We had about $31.2 million encumbered. In the end, and this is not final, by the way, and that's why I said pending the final close, but this is the latest number that I had. $25,746,422 fully expended, and then we had $5.5 million in orders, mostly technology and facilities, that had to be canceled because of supply chain delays, and reopened in 23-24. So those orders have been reopened, which means there are already significant encumbrances, both for those orders as well as for the new expenditures in 23-24 already. Right? And so in 23-24, our current year, we are going to expend fully according to the plan. Now, I want to just take a few minutes to cover some key points in the transition plan for the end of ESSER or post-ESSER era. And that's going to bring us into our new fiscal era, 24-25. So first of all, in terms of a budget planning, we have to plan for the alliance funds that are going to be diverted to the diversity grant. We already discussed this. I've just included it as an important point. We're waiting for the guidelines, as I stated, and but we're already thinking about how can we leverage those funds. So we may be able to move, for example, funds that we set aside for diversity, equity, and inclusion training out of Title IV, and move those activities into the diversity grant if allowed in 24-25, and that would release funds in Title IV that could be used to help fund the director of literacy or the director of math. And then we have an in-school peer support program that has been in ESSER for the last 3 years, so that may be allowable in the diversity grant. We don't know yet, but if it were allowable, perhaps when it's at a higher point in 24-25, we could fund that program there. So this is what we're looking at and monitoring as we get more information. Again, I wrote here prospects. This is not final. These are prospects dependent upon the guidelines. Next, the impact of the new Connecticut kindergarten law. So Mr. Kolovich just referred to it. Children must be age 5 by September 1 to enroll in education starting next year, 24-25. So we're going to be analyzing the data in October to determine the allocation methodology for the kindergarten classes. We would expect a smaller number of classes. However, it's going to depend on the breakage in particular across every elementary school. So in some schools, it may require a reduction. In some schools, it will not require a reduction. We just don't know yet. Now, what will happen in terms of funding? Well, we don't know. Funding for the district is based on total enrollment. Enrollment may decrease in kindergarten, but increase in other grades. In addition, I'm hoping that the state, in recognition of the impact of the law and the statewide impact on all districts, will perhaps consider increasing the per capita amounts in their allocation formula so that districts do not lose a significant amount of revenue and can maintain classes that they have to maintain due to the breakage across the classes. So we are aware we have to take this into account in our planning. Next, we have to bring back the funding for mandated services in
Siegel, you're gone again.
positions and these services in ESSERS is because they arose out of the pandemic. After as the pandemic was occurring, there were higher needs for special education services. There were higher needs for English language learner services, for occupational therapy and for speech and psychology services. So unless there's a decline in service need, we have to bring it back. Now, I wrote 6 million here. It may be 7 million, because we also have in 24-25 year one of a new BEA contract, as well as contractual agreements with which we must comply for all staff. Next, 24-25, we need to maximize revenue through advocacy. So the City Council did increase the city share in the current year to 2.5 million from 2 million. We all know it's not enough, but we do appreciate that they increased it. So let's aim for more in 24-25. State ECS is projected at 8 million according to the data that had been released. That's prior to the percentage reduction for the diversity grant. That could change. Next, in 23-24, we want to optimize our revenue streams. We want to reverse the losses in the pre-K and the interdistrict magnet grants. So what are we doing? We're striving to fill all the pre-K seats starting in September. In September, we need every seat filled so that we can optimize our revenue. And we're already charging the excess cost to Title I. We don't need to charge additional excess costs because we're not being fully funded. All right, as I indicated, we receive only $108,000 per class. That's clearly not enough for a teacher and a para, salary plus benefits. At the Fairchild Wheeler campus, we need to increase enrollment in compliance with the various standards. And I listed here the residency standard because and there's also a racial isolation standard. And we have to strive to achieve both, of course, because both are essential. There is a shortfall in that grant, as I have shared, and we had to cover $1.7 million last year. We could have to cover as much as $2 million in the current year unless the revenue increases with increased enrollment. So we're remaining optimistic. I don't have any data yet that could be considered accurate, We'll be monitoring it throughout September. The final data will be as of October 1. The next item in our transition plan is to plan for the change in the state law for magnet tuition. And we already covered this in June. I just repeated the same information. I'll just summarize very quickly. So the law that was passed in the last legislative session, the legislature decided that the payment of tuition would be phased out. And the phase out will start in 24-25. And I believe, let's see, it says we are allowed to charge, I believe it's 58% of the prior year's tuition in 24-20. Here it is. Starting in 24-25, we can charge 58% of the amount charged in the prior year. And then presumably in the next year, it either phases out at a lower percentage or it phases out totally. We just don't know yet. But it will be phased out. And in exchange, the per capita amount in the state revenue grant is supposed to increase, but no one knows at this point the ultimate impact. Now, what I had shown you previously is this chart where I looked at what did we pay out in 22-23, what did we take in, and what's the difference? And we paid out more than we took in. So theoretically, if magnet tuition is no longer paid, we could benefit. However, we're going to have to apply that amount, if it materializes, to any shortfall at the Fairchild campus in the state magnet grant. So this could be a positive outcome for us. And then, of course, if the per capita also increases, we may be able to lessen significantly the amount of the deficit in the grant, or possibly eliminate it, depending on the additional revenue captured in the grant. All right, next, we're looking at potential cost savings. So I mentioned utilities before. We're going to continue to reinforce energy conservation measures. I will be meeting with the We Transport team in accordance with the contract, because we wrote into the contract that we would explore potential cost savings based on the ratio of electric vehicles to gas vehicles. I'm not anticipating any savings that they will agree to in the current year, but perhaps in 24-25, depending upon the ratio and any savings that they achieve, perhaps they'd be willing to discuss some savings. So we're exploring every possible opportunity. And the contract wasn't, the language in the contract that we included is not binding. They're not absolutely required to reach an agreement, but it did say that they would, that both sides would come together, review the data, and with full transparency, discuss any savings that We Transport had achieved, and in turn, hopefully formulate a plan to return some savings to the Board of Ed. The next item in the plan is to conserve our operating resources in our final year of ESSER. So we're optimizing and leveraging our funds and striving to retain savings on deposit to the maximum extent. And of course, we're continuing to optimize rollover where we can and to the extent possible, so that we have a cushion in the event that grants decline, as happened with Title I. And for the ESSER grant, which is ending September 30th, we're optimizing and leveraging the use of those funds to optimal benefit. We're going to continue to fund our non-certified positions through the end of the grant. So that will help us to mitigate the impact of the loss of the grant in 23-24 and further conserve operating resources. But all the certified positions end in June. We'll continue some of the summer services, the summer programs, the tech support. We did purchase many multi-year agreements for curriculum and technology initiatives. I listed some here, such as the Hill for Literacy, which Melissa Jenkins, the CAO, has reported on. Tech Trep, which is a platform for STEM courses. That's actually a 5-year plan, so that goes through 25-26. So even though ESSER ends, we will still have the benefit of various services that were purchased on multi-year agreements. We're going to be absorbing personnel that are in temporary positions, meaning ESSER-funded positions, into vacancies, but we're going to continue to fund services in ESSER compliant with ESSER guidelines to offset the operating expenses in 23-24, and then in 24-25, they'll be funded in those true vacancies and those true positions. We're going to conserve our operating funds and maximize the available balance on deposit in the ISF. So in terms of the social workers and guidance counselors, as you know, we have actually 21 additional positions, 10 guidance counselors, 11 social workers. But the issue is that in the final year, as we look ahead to the spring, if we have individuals in those positions and we don't have sufficient attrition to absorb those individuals, we would have to go into layoff. And that imposes a significant financial risk for the district because according to Connecticut law, we have to maintain the individuals, even though they receive a layoff letter, on the payroll until a hearing is held, and the hearing has to be held within I don't have the final legal requirement tonight, but it's either 60 days or 90 days. So we want to minimize the financial liability as we move to the end of ESSER. So as attrition occurs in the current year, we're not going to refill the position, but we will provide an alternate service. So we might have a retired social worker, for example, come in on a per diem basis. So the individual would not be in a full-time in a position that would be subject to that state law requirement. They would work on a per diem basis. They'd be a part-time employee. So we'll absolutely provide services funded in ESSER. And we'll do that with the easy positions, EASI, elementary academic support instructor positions as well. So our schools will continue to have support funded through ESSER, but we will minimize the financial risk to the district. All right. We have to prepare for the end of the temporary services that we had over the last 3 years. You may recall the Effective School Solutions vendor, Caribbean Youth, the various youth partnership programs. So I just listed some of them. And we are searching for potential new grants that could extend specified services for 1 or more years. What are our highest priority needs? Obviously, we have many needs. I just listed 3, but we're going to try to find funding to maintain the temporary kindergarten paras. There's no guarantee that we can, but it is a goal. Social workers and counselors. We want to seek additional funding to maintain some positions. Our teacher leader model is another priority. And there are many priorities, but these are 3 of the highest. So I just wanted to give some examples. Now, I'm going to end on a positive note. We did receive a congressional grant through State Senator Blumenthal's office. We won't have it until 24-25. It takes about a year at the federal level to move the approved funding through the federal cycle. So this will work to our advantage because it will enable the retention, we believe, of 2 social workers and 2 guidance counselors, plus various services and supplies. So that is our plan at this time. We have another congressional grant through the state senator's office for library renewal, which has been reported to you in the past. And that grant has just materialized. We knew that it had been approved last year, but again, it took a year to move through the cycle. And so we will have those funds available in the current year. The funds must be spent in the current year. And we will utilize the indirect cost on that grant to fund one of our self-sustaining positions in the grants office. And the balance, about $1.9 million, will be applied for library renewal. And our CAO, Melissa Jenkins, is coordinating that plan in conjunction with the superintendent. So thank you for your attention. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Ms. Siegel. Just before we begin, let the record reflect, Chairperson Ms. Brown is in the building, in the meeting, I'm sorry. And now I'll go with questions. Committee members, Ms. Baptiste Perez. If you're trying to speak, Ms. Baptiste Perez, you are on mute. Seconds. Okay, let's go to Ms. Perez.
Sorry, can you just repeat? So you said there's 21 social workers and school counselors. That was that 21 number?
All right.
And-
So in the ESSER grant, we funded 10 additional guidance counselors.
Okay.
And 11 additional social workers. You may be wondering, well, why 11? Well, it was 10 plus 1 at Dunbar School in support of the Special Education SOAR Center.
Okay, and so if that money runs out, we're not going to replace if they like leave the district. We're just going to replace using, you said, per diem workers?
Well, as attrition occurs during the course of the year, we're not going to replace them, because if we replace them, they're going to be on a layoff list. The last one hired would be the first one to be accessed, and we want to minimize the financial risk of liability to the district at the end of the ESSER grant. But we will provide alternate services. So in the past, when a guidance counselor or social worker was on a leave of absence, as an example, the directors of the programs at the district level were able to identify individuals who were either retired or are not retired, but working part-time, willing to come into the district to work on a per diem basis.
Thank you for clarifying for me.
Thank you.
Sorry, I had to step away for a second. Ms. Baptiste Perez, are you back? Do you have any questions? Okay, Mr. Benahan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Going back, Ms. Siegel, I'm gonna piggyback at what Ms. Paris said. That's the part when you say we have to be ready, let's see, some contract or something to, lay off. Because contract, or they're gonna expire soon, something like that. That's almost the same thing as Ms. Paris asked you the question.
Right. So in the spring of 2024, we will be staffing for 24-25. And as we look ahead at that time to 24-25, we will no longer have the funding to support 10 additional guidance counselors and 11 additional social workers. So what is our plan? The first part of our plan is to strive to find alternate funding, to seek grant opportunities. But there isn't any guarantee that we're going to be successful. Now, I shared that we have been successful in obtaining a congressional grant, which should enable the retention of 2 social workers and 2 guidance counselors in 24-25. That will be for 1 year only. The second part of our plan is to be prepared to eliminate those positions. If we do nothing, and in the spring of 24, we were to have 10 individuals in those supplemental lines that are no longer going to be funded, and in those guidance counselor lines, and 10 individuals in the social worker lines, if that were to happen, we would have to go into layoff, and we would have to lay off the least senior social workers and guidance counselors. Now, presumably, the individuals would seek employment in other locales, including other districts. But for those who do not, we would be required to, they may seek other employment and resign. For those who do not resign, we would be required, after issuing the layoff letter, to maintain them on payroll until such time as a hearing takes place in accordance with Connecticut law. And the cost factor for maintaining them on the payroll would present a financial liability for the district at a time when the ESSER funding has ended and we are returning to a new era after 3 years of ESSER. So in order to counter that eventuality, we are going to not refill positions as attrition occurs during the course of the year, but we will provide an alternate equivalent service. And an alternate equivalent service could be a per diem social worker or guidance counselor. Another alternate service could be a service obtained from a vendor under contract. So there are various options that will be considered and pursued in order to ensure our schools have the supplemental support in this final year of ESSER.
Thank you, Ms. Siegel. And I'm going to say this, and with your permission, Mr. Chair, then we know that are the financial, you're the professional person, and we thank you, thank God you're here and you have everything control about the budget. I would like to have and to see how we can prepare us now that we have a strong board members. We have 9, and we have our Dr. Carmela Levy Davis, very professional. We have to do something. I know we have doors we can open, but I'm always say this, and this coming from my grandmother. She always told me, don't leave the people open the door for you when you know that's you're successful. Open the door and show them you are there because you have for a reason. What I mean is, you can prepare something good where we have to go so we can knock doors and trying to be sure we got the budget back in, because what the last thing we want is we don't want to give layoff and we don't want to tell people, we don't have the money. I know it's not easy. It's a protocol, it's a policy, it's a process, but I believe in you that you can have a good plan. We can knock doors to see what we can do for our business school. Thank you, Ms. Marlene Siegel, for your amazing job. And thank you, Mr. Chair. No more questions.
Thank you.
Ms. Brown, any questions?
No questions at the moment.
Okay, I'm going to go into my questions now. Ms. Siegel, it might be beneficial. Could you go to ESSER funded positions and just give us a breakdown if we want to keep all those positions, like the 45 paras, 10 social workers, 11 psychologists, what would be the net cost to the operating budget should we keep those positions?
Well, for a teacher position, a social worker, guidance counselor, we're looking at $125,000, could be $130,000, depending on the salary. So I would say to ensure that salary and benefits can be incorporated, on average, about $130,000 per position. So 10 positions is 1.3, 20 positions, 2.6, say 2.7, 2.6, 2.7.
And that was for the teachers or for all?
That would be, well, for a teacher position, we have been hiring teachers at higher steps than in the past, right? So I'm looking toward the higher range, and I'm using 135,000. That's based on current year information. Next year will be the first year of another contract, so it's a significant expense.
Right. What about the social workers? Is it 10 social workers or 11?
They're all teachers.
Oh, they're all teachers.
Under the same salary scale.
Okay. And what about the 45 paras?
That is about, let's see, about 1.5 million, 1.6 million.
So a total of $3.8 million we would have to find in the operating budget, which has been at a shortfall for basically last 10 years at least, if not further back.
Right. And that's why we're looking at with the superintendent, highest priority needs, and we have to ensure a balanced budget first. That's our primary priority for 24-25. If with all of the steps that I've listed in our transitional plan, and all of our fiscal management strategies, if we can produce a balanced budget for 24-25 and still have resources available, then we can look to possibly maintaining some services. But I would predict, based on current information, that it would be minimal and it would be limited.
Absolutely. Again, for the new board members, new superintendent, right? For the new board members and the new superintendent, and for anybody watching who might not be familiar, why can't we just go into a deficit and just keep the people on the payroll anyway?
Well, by law, we are not allowed to operate at a deficit. The only entity in the United States that can operate at a deficit is the federal government. State governments must operate with a balanced budget, and school districts are required to operate with a balanced budget. And board members can be held liable if a district goes into deficit.
Thank you. And why can't we take out loans or anything like that, again, for the benefit of the public?
No.
So we could only spend what we get, and then we gotta cut the rest to meet our legal obligation.
Exactly.
All right, thank you. Can you go back to the kindergarten thing? I don't think this could be emphasized enough.
Yes.
Yeah, I've been speaking with Cabe about this, and the estimates is about a 1/3 drop in kindergarten enrollment. If we take our 20,000 students, and we've got probably like 1,500 and change, if you're just dividing by grades, by 12 grades or whatever have you, we end up with 507 students that may be possibly a projected shortfall. If we're looking at only the base amount, not ESSER funding, of the ECS funding, we're talking $5.85 million in possible reduction if things aren't fixed and everything holding true throughout their matriculation. That's going to be every year. And if we take the whole like 17 roughly $17,000 in state funding and reduce that by 507. That's $8.619 million. So that's something I want everybody to keep in mind, that we really, really got to get on top of that and advocate for in front of our legislators. Definitely going forward, because we definitely need to hold harmless for that. Because as you said, if we lose 507 students, 507 kindergarten, it's not necessarily across the same schools. It's not going to be evenly divided. We could have some with a reduction of 10, which would still require a teacher, and some with a reduction of 5.
That's right.
Some with no reductions. So we're not necessarily reducing X amount of teachers because we're reducing X amount of kindergarten. And the same will hold true as they matriculate from grade to grade. So this is very, very pressing on my mind.
Yes, and we just don't know how the state is going to modify, if at all, the formula. So if they base the Alliance ECS on the prior year numbers, which would be October 1 of 23, that's our current year, then theoretically there wouldn't be any impact on funding. We would just be required to implement the law. But if they decide to project the number of kindergarten students in this first year and introduce a reduction, that's going to impact every district in the state. Now, theoretically, we would think it would impact larger districts to a greater degree. But even a smaller district might have difficulty maintaining classes when required to maintain classes in accordance with class caps, even though revenue has declined. So I'm going to remain hopeful that at the state level, there will be advocates, including from Bridgeport, to emphasize that there should be an accommodation in the funding formula to allow for the breakage that is going to occur in every district. Right? Now, the other point to keep in mind, as I mentioned earlier, is that we will lose enrollment in kindergarten. There's no question about that. And we may have fewer classes. The impact on the budget is not clearly outlined at this moment. But we also may have gains in enrollment in the upper grades. So our total budget may stay stable in terms of the projected Alliance increase. So these are questions. It's much too early to know, but we do have to plan accordingly. And we will be projecting the reduction in kindergarten students by school. Yes, that may involve, it will involve to some degree, fewer kindergarten classes for 24-25. Now, what does that mean? When we have fewer classes, we need fewer teachers in kindergarten. So those positions would not exist. Schools will undergo attrition due to retirements and retention. They'll absorb those teachers. Teachers aren't absorbed, and they'll be accessing, and they'll go into vacancies in other schools. We have hired this year approximately 200 additional 200 teachers to replace teachers who resigned or retired. So we are anticipating again for 24-25 turnover. So teachers who are accessed out of kindergarten would be absorbed into other vacancies. If not, they'll be in excess and they'll be absorbed as soon as vacancies occur. But our cost factor would decline due to the number of K classes declining. Will it decline in alignment with any decline in revenue? If a decline occurs, that is the unknown question at this time. So all we can do at this point is conduct the projections and implement the projection methodology and analyze the impact, and we'll be ready to conduct the allocation conferences starting in late February, as we do every year, and schools will have fewer kindergarten classes in general.
Right, and here's the part that I really didn't think of until this minute as you were speaking is this is only going to be basically a 1-year reduction in the kindergarten population if everything remains equal, and then the next year everybody who is in pre-K it should smooth out. Theoretically, we should have the same amount of kindergarten kids that we have now, because the kids that were on pause will now be off pause, and our kindergarten population will increase the year after implementation to possibly back to normal. So then we'll have a need for those excess kindergarten teachers to return back. Does that make sense?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, I believe we have about 37 pre-K classes. So, children enter kindergarten not only from the pre-K classes, they're entering from the community. But hypothetically, in each year subsequent to 24-25, the number of kindergarten classes would stabilize.
Yeah,
unless the number of children turning age 5 by September 1 increases.
Correct, but all right. Currently the year is like by whatever date it is. If birth rates may remain the same over a period of a year, the only year that's really going to be affected is the first year upon implementation, when the children are left out, are not able to attend kindergarten. But those kids that missed the September 1st cutoff, they will be entering kindergarten the next year, along with everybody else who was born before September, who would have likely been at school. So I think that
right, but in every year, it depends upon how many children are in the community turning 5 by September 1.
Correct. It's just something else to think about. I'll leave it alone and go on to Mr. Benehan's question.
We have to defer to the demographic experts who can examine the ages of the children in the community.
Right, and I think that would be a good move to get ahead of as quickly as possible. Thank you. Mr. Benehan, you got another question?
No question, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Any other questions from any board members or committee members?
No questions.
Okay, so then I think that's at the end. It was a very interesting meeting. Started off a bit rough, and I think it's strong. Okay, entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
And I shall second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, everybody have a great night, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night, everyone. God bless. God bless you all.
Aye.